And to that piece of lieutenant that's always on his podcast, bashing us, yeah.
Good morning, everyone. 265 Police Live Series brought to you by New York's Finest Unfiltered Podcast. It's July 12, 2024. Sad state of affairs for the NYPD. It's a sad state of affairs for America. The malicious prosecution of NYPD police officer Juan Perez. Juan Perez has become a friend of this podcast. I consider Juan Perez a good friend. We've been walking through the steps of his story here. It's been horrific. It's tragic, but it's tragic for everyone. If you think it's just Juan Perez is you. Juan Perez is not only a cop. Juan Perez is an American, and every American should feel slighted by what's happened here, by this malicious prosecution.
Yeah, let's get into it. Juan Perez, working in the 6th precinct, gets called for an EDP. He gets there, intoxicated male. Reports that he was waving a bottle at people. He was throwing water on people. I believe there were even reports that he pulled a knife on somebody. So Juan's working with a rookie officer. He encountered the emotionally disturbed male. He asked the emotionally disturbed male to sit down in a chair. The male does. At some point, Juan's partner, I believe, goes to the car or something like that, and Juan turns. And as Juan turns, the emotionally disturbed male jumps on him. Juan then begins to struggle. He gets the individual to the wall. He starts throwing punches. He throws 6 punches in 6 seconds. At some point, to me, it appears on the 6th punch that the individual becomes knocked out and incapacitated. Juan immediately stops throwing punches. Again, recalls for a rush on the bus because now the emotionally disturbed person is also an aided, and he does exactly what we were trained to do in the police academy, which is to use closed fist strikes. It's also, I believe, correlates a lot with the diaphragm law because there's 2 things that you could really do effectively now in close quarters and it not be considered a misdemeanor for you. So it's either you're going to throw closed fist strikes or you're going to play pity pat with a violent resisting perpetrator.
I saw the progression of this towards the end of the tenure of my career. So towards the end of the tenure of my career, in a couple of civilian complaints that I had against me that were substantiated, that was the analogy, and that was the ideology from the Civilian Complaint Review Board and how they analyzed my cases. And their perspective was, in one case in particular, where myself and my team, we had a resisting perpetrator. This was a violent perpetrator. He already had a history of rendering a lieutenant in the 3-4 precinct unconscious. So this is the nomenclature. This is the information that we had. He was wanted for a shooting. He had numerous gun charges. He had a pattern of resisting arrest. But you know what he didn't have? He didn't have convictions. So this was the problem that was upheld against me in my civilian complaint case. So we see the progression now. Now it's becoming criminal cases. This is the new phenomenon against a police officer. But what's interesting about my case, it was the same analysis that I saw what's going on with Juan Perez. So, John, we've been in constant contact with Juan Perez, helping him, guiding him. But we've become a friend to him. Juan Perez turns out to be a great guy. He's a New York City police officer. He's a New York City kid. He was also a veteran. He served in the military. And what's interesting, we spoke yesterday, and we spoke about his case. And he said they harped on how many punches were deployed. He said that a lot of the decision that was made in the prosecution's case was developed and built on the 3rd strike that was deployed. They had made the decision that 3 strikes at some point, the 3 strikes were exonerated and necessary. But the 3 strikes after that were unnecessary, and that's where the assault came. So that happened to me also. In my case, my civilian complaint case, which I was not prosecuted, thank God, but I'm sure if it was now, we would probably see that progression. Again, I had deployed numerous punches where they said, well, up to a point, even my civilian complaint narrative, up to a point I was exonerated, and then at some point it was too many punches deployed. So this has become so subjective, and we're depicting this, and we're dialing on such minutia because we have body camera footage. We can slow it down, but this is complete opposition of the Supreme Court case Graham versus Connor. And Graham versus Connor gives police officers hindsight. It gives police officers what's going on in real time, what they felt during the actual incident, not in a controlled environment watching by body camera footage or other type of video.
What did Juan feel? I don't know. Apparently, the defense knows what he felt in 6 seconds, right? I don't know. That 6 seconds is a very short time in a fight, in life, in anything. I mean, I just went for quadruple the amount of that time right now in the time I just took over from talking to Eric. That's how fast 6 seconds is. So 6 seconds in a violent struggle, you have to be utterly perfect. I don't even believe Kaz Jong-un's drones could be that perfect to determine that the person was incapacitated in a matter of 3 seconds to stop. So I think a couple of things that we need to note here. So now the defendant never filed a CCRB against Juan. The defendant never called IAB against Juan Perez. There was never a complaint made against Juan Perez. The individual who is known to have suffered from depression and anxiety moves to, I believe, Kosovo. I believe enters some type of rehab facility, and while there, almost 2 years after the incident, commits suicide. It's at that time that the family decides that Juan Perez was the cause of his death. And they called the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, and the Manhattan District Attorney's Office brings Juan up on misdemeanor 3 assault charges and indicts Juan Perez for misdemeanor assault. Now, I think we got to bring this whole thing into context. It's a New York City police officer. He responds to a 911 call of an emotionally disturbed male. While responding to a 911 call, the male ensues a physical attack against the New York City police officer. The New York City police officer deploys 6 closed fist strikes, and the New York City police officer is arrested and indicted for misdemeanor assault. Just the facts of that case alone should send chills through everyone. And listen, I've been saying it. Eric's been saying it. Fighting is ugly. Police work is ugly. It doesn't look pretty on camera. That doesn't mean people need to go to jail for doing what they're paid to do, what they're trained to do, and what New York City residents expect them to do.
I think it's absolutely ridiculous that it's come to the point because of this woke progressive movement, this anti-police movement, this complete disdain and bias for police work and anyone that's on the conservative side of things, to actually depict this frame by frame and have the ability to actually look at this in segments and actually say that up to the point of 3 strikes, that subjectively he was exonerated and he did his job appropriately. But after that, it was unnecessary. At some point, they made that determination, which I say is a complete opposition of the way we should look at police work, especially in correlation to Graham versus Connor, is that we need to look at the totality of circumstances. We have a violent perpetrator subject who's emotionally disturbed. We have information. We have credible witnesses that said that this particular emotionally disturbed person in a mental crisis was attacking people. People were intimidated. People were scared. We even had a witness in Juan's case that said he was intimidated by this particular emotionally disturbed perpetrator. And I say perpetrator because he was attacking the public and he attacked the New York City police officer. And that's why I said originally on the introduction of this podcast is that Juan Perez is not only a New York City police officer, he's not only you, a cop, he's you, an American, because Juan Perez went there as a representative of American, protecting himself, his partner, and the public. And that's why I find it extremely problematic and disappointing, and I find it disgusting at this point. You know what? I will give kudos to the union at this point. They stood up and they defended Juan in this case. But that's not enough. There are 20,000 some are New York City police officers. How many lieutenants are there in the Lieutenants Benevolent Association? John, maybe about 3,000 to 4,000. I don't know what the numbers right now were. How many sergeants are there? Where were the sergeants? Where were the lieutenants? Where were the police officers at Juan's trial to defend him and stand with him? And unfortunately, when you're in a position like this and you're in a pickle in New York City Police Department, you are left and treated like a leper. And that's how Juan was treated. Because I spoke to Juan. I said, Juan, how many lieutenants, how many sergeants, how many police officers were at your trial? None, other than the union. How many police officers called you today to see how you were doing? He can count on one hand on how many police officers contacted Juan to check on him, to see how he was doing. He has been treated like a leper. And yet, and I'm talking to you right now, even my fans, my supporters out there right now, our supporters, you're one of the 20,000 out there. Why can't you pick up the phone and call Juan Perez? Because Juan Perez is you. Now, listen, I've been saying it for years, and we all know it. I did special operations work. So did John, and some of you are still doing it right now. And you are at the forefront and have the most ability of getting into a pickle because you do intrusive police work. But this new phenomenon is not just attacking those doing intrusive police work. This can attack any police officer. Juan was doing his job, and he was called to do what he was paid and trained to do to help the public. He was summoned by a 911 call, and he now went from cop to criminal.
Yeah, you get all the dumb comments. Oh, don't do anything. He responded to a 911 call. He's not doing intrusive police work. He responded to a 911 call. That is the core mission of policing at that point, right? There's no way a New York City police officer could avoid this situation. You're going to the call. If you don't, you're going to be fired. What can you do? Be attacked? Play pity pat while you're being attacked? Hopefully the person's not violent enough to kill you. Hopefully the person's not violent enough to maim you or injure you for life. I mean, it's a nonsensical argument. So just to back up, around that time, Juan now is a military veteran. He is now with his military time is informed that he's going to be indicted with 19 years and 7 months on, including, with his military time added up. So he had really no one to reach out to. He was already informed he wasn't going to be indemnified by the city of New York, which I don't know how they made that determination right off the bat. So they informed him they weren't going to indemnify. And he reached out to the Finest Unfiltered, right? And he asked us our opinion. What should we do? And myself and Eric, we both sat and we discussed with him. And we said that we would both submit for retirement and leave under investigation, because the way New York City is right now, more than likely, you will be fired. You could be fired even if you were found not guilty. You could be fired even if you were found guilty, right? And the way New York City is, and the anti-police twinge that's going on, as much as I watched the half video they put out, of course, the video doesn't show. If you Google it in the news, and I'll put some articles on the bottom of this episode, wherever you're watching or listening. But of course, they don't show the entire video. It's just a clip of Juan punching the guy 6 times in 6 seconds. So when I watched that, I didn't see anything wrong, because the way I just explained it, it's a New York City police officer who was attacked and deployed 6 strikes in 6 seconds. And unfortunately, fortunately, he knocked the male out. Sorry, he incapacitated the male. He stopped the threat. He was able to subdue the threat, and it doesn't look pretty. And so Juan did that. He submitted for retirement. He left. He has no good guy letter. He has no ID card. At the time, the union wasn't supporting him. We started to advocate on out there for him. There was a fundraiser held for him. I forget who did it for him. And we shared that information. And then the union stepped up. The union stepped up. I'm not knocking the PBA at this at all. They came up when they, I believe they took over his legal fees that he was paying, the rest of it. And then now, as this is happening, they've been there to support him throughout this trial. So I think the PBA did do a good job when it comes to representing Juan Perez. I think the NYPD did a horrible job at representing Juan Perez. And I just want to say that if Juan did not make that decision to retire without a good guy letter, without a ID card, when he's still able to keep his pension, his variable supplement, and his health benefits, he would have lost those yesterday, because he would have been terminated by the New York City Police Department. And it's unfortunate that people are under threat of civil liability, and now he's at risk of losing his freedom for up to 365 days for responding to a 911 call and doing what he was paid and trained to do.
You know, I think that people look at Juan as a reflection of themselves, and they should. And that's why they didn't want to believe that Juan Perez could actually be convicted of doing his job, not even doing intrusive police work. This wasn't even self-initiated. This was the backbone of the police department. It was doing patrol in uniform, responding to 911 calls, just as New York City police officers do day in and day out. This is actually reflective. I had put out a tweet numerous times. John, do you remember I put out a tweet saying that you are now playing blackjack and roulette when you are a New York City police officer in uniform, because the 911 call that you get summoned to, maybe the 911 call that turns you into a criminal, that sacrifices your financial liability, your civil liability, and ultimately your freedom. And the reason why I say that police officers see Juan Perez as their own reflection is because they didn't want to admit that Juan Perez could actually be convicted, which is why I believe that Juan Perez was getting bad advice. And the bad advice that he was getting was to write it out, not to retire, try to retire with a good guy letter, retire under good terms. But John and I foresaw this. We foreshadowed these events going forward, and we knew that if Juan Perez was to stay as a New York City police officer, ultimately, with the disciplinary matrix, the lack of support from the upper echelon, the NYPD, and potentially the attack from the Civilian Complaint Review Board, if that had come forward, Juan would no longer be a New York City police officer. He would not have health benefits. He would not have a pension. And ultimately, he would just be a criminal. And it's a completely sad story for a veteran who served the United States military, a New York City police officer that did his job honorably. It's come down to 3 strikes. How can we depict such minutia for a New York City police officer? Say, well, these 3 punches are appropriate, but these 3 punches are not. And clearly the perspective comes by those that suffer from the Dunning-Kruger effect. They have never done police work themselves, just as the office of Alvin Bragg. And again, you said it, there's no support from the upper echelon of the NYPD. So any leadership of the NYPD, particularly Tariq Shepard, who was promoted to the Deputy Commissioner of Public Information while he was the commanding officer of the 2-8 precinct, he said on his Twitter page, because that's the most important thing to get promoted as a commanding officer of the New York City Police Department, that Alvin Bragg was his partner, and he was proud to stand with Alvin Bragg and had a photo with him. Are you still proud now, as the Deputy Commissioner of Public Information, that a New York City police officer was attacked for doing his job? So anyone that says this administration has your back, that's completely foolish, and you're behaving like a hooligan if you think that they have your back. That's completely feeble-minded to believe that, because they're self-serving, worrying about their careers. Alvin Bragg is destroying New York City police officers, which is destroying the public and public safety. This is absolutely ridiculous. I understand it's been the way for years where New York City police officers turn their back on other police officers when they're in a pickle, but no longer can you do that. Let's change. Let's change today. Let's change today. Call Juan Perez on the phone. Reach out to him. Ask him how he's doing. If another police officer gets into a pickle, reach out to them. Ask them how they're doing. To the New York City PBA, thank you for stepping up in this case. Thank you for defending Juan. Thank you for taking the advice from the New York's Finest Unfiltered podcast. Juan Perez, we support you.
PBA President Pat Hendry put out this statement. The verdict will send a chilling message to every police officer. These prosecutors and the court effectively telling police officers we can't do our job. The community called the police because this individual was intoxicated and out of control on the streets. When our police officer arrived, he attempted to de-escalate the situation. That's when the individual attacked him, threw him to the ground, and put his hand around our police officer's neck. Cops are being violently attacked on the streets every day. If this is what happens when we try to protect ourselves, we won't be able to protect the public. We believe this verdict ignores the facts, and we will be helping our police officer appeal it immediately. So we here agree with that statement wholeheartedly. I mean, shout out to Pat Hendry. This is what's needed at this time. And things need to be talked about and discussed. And Juan opted for a judge trial because this is the decisions a cop has to make. Do I go in front of what is more than likely a liberal jury in Manhattan that doesn't like police officers, or do I go with a judge who understands the law? And I don't know. I got to be honest, I don't know. And now that we sit here and he was found guilty and we could argue the facts of the case, saying that, oh, that was the 3 seconds, the 3 punches was an assault, but the 3 before that was good. He should have known better in the split hair of a second right there. That. So we could argue all day about that. But let's argue about what it is now. Now he has a guilty verdict. Now he has a guilty verdict on a misdemeanor. And will it provide public safety to put a veteran, a person who has no criminal charges ever, in jail for a misdemeanor assault that he didn't start, that he was defending himself over? You want to say that that's assault at 3 seconds? It went from him being assaulted to now he's the aggressor. If you want to say that, fine. Is it going to provide public safety to the people of the city of New York to put Juan Perez in jail? And the answer to that question is wholeheartedly no. Absolutely not. And I was speaking to a friend yesterday, and we were talking about it, and he goes, well, what is he worried about? There's nothing to worry about. Who has ever went to jail for a misdemeanor assault? Who has ever went to jail for a misdemeanor assault, has no previous convictions, has a good record, a veteran, a police officer? He's got nothing to worry about. He's not going to jail. And in my opinion, I said, well, I know one person, and it actually happened this year, and his name is Sergeant Stephen Lee. And that is why we were saying that everybody should be supporting him, regardless of how you feel about him, regardless of how you feel about his police career or anything else. Stephen Lee is you. You are Stephen Lee. Juan Perez is you. You are Juan Perez. And now you see why we were talking about that, because it comes full circle.
No longer can we trust the justice system. Absolutely not. And again, I'm going to say that constantly. And John, you reiterated it. And we need to constantly regurgitate this information. This has to sink in your head. If you're sitting watching this right now and you're a cop yourself, you are Juan Perez. You are Stephen Lee. Because you could be next. You might be doing intrusive police work, but you might not. You might be summoned to a 911 call. You might not. You might just be standing a post and someone comes up to you and approaches you and says, that guy robbed me. That guy assaulted me. And now you're faced with that adversary and you are put in a position to do your job as a New York City police officer. And now you're left to count how many punches you deploy, how many close fist strikes that you utilize to overcome your adversary, because Alvin Bragg is going to be in your head. I remember Juan Perez. He deployed 6 punches. 3 punches were good. Halfway through the point of this overcoming a violent struggle, Juan Perez was good. But halfway through the point, he committed assault. It's funny how he crossed hairs in this situation. And no longer, again, as I said, can you trust this justice system? Think about this, John. They came for Donald Trump. Conviction. They came for Stephen Lee. Conviction. They came for Juan Perez. Conviction. Are you next? Are we not seeing the pattern here? Are we not seeing the new phenomenon? And I said this earlier. Not just police officers. Anyone that may potentially be on the conservative right. You are under attack. You, especially as a New York City police officer, you represent the public every day. You represent yourselves. You represent an organization. And again, that's why I say we need to change our ideology. Call Juan Perez. Pick up the phone, see how he's doing. Any police officer who's in a pickle. There should have been 20,000 police officers at his court case. But Juan Perez can tell you he could count on one hand how many police officers reached out to him yesterday at his conviction. He's been treated as a leper. Stephen Lee has been treated as a leper. Anyone that's in a pickle in the police department eventually gets treated as a leper. So was I when I had my civilian complaints. Fortunately, I was not eventually prosecuted, but I'm sure with this new phenomenon, had I still been on the job 2 years later at this point, I'm sure they would have sought prosecution for doing your job as a New York City police officer. Do we not see the standard now? Donald Trump, Stephen Lee, Juan Perez, and yet I see the most violent perpetrators not get convicted of assault. 20, 30 some odd felonies. Some of these perpetrators, some of these persons of interest that I had dealt with did not get convicted of misdemeanor assaults. And yet Stephen Lee was convicted. Juan Perez was convicted. Stephen Lee got jail time. What is next for Juan Perez? His upcoming sentencing is in September. Will you support him now? Will you reach out to Juan Perez? Will you show up to his court case? Will you represent him? He needs you more now than ever because you need him too.
I spoke to Juan. He was a little upset. And I told him, I said, you should be proud of yourself. And he said, well, what should I be proud of? And I said, would you do anything differently than you done that night? He said, no. I said, then you should be proud of yourself. You did what you thought was right. You did, in my eyes, what was right. And, unfortunately, New York City doesn't see it that way, But there's an old saying in the police department, and the old timers all used to say it. And, now with the whole guardian mindset instead of the warriors, right? They don't want warriors anymore. They want guardians that carry salad tongs and touch bad guys like this and use their Care Bear stare to de-escalate situations. Fortunately, none of that works, and it hasn't. And, de-escalation sometimes is what we saw from Juan Perez. He de-escalated the situation. It took 6 punches to do it, but he did it. He de-escalated the situation. He didn't stand there with the Care Bear stare and shoot the rainbow out of his chest. Didn't happen. Didn't work, because those things actually don't work in real life. So they talk about a lot about this mindset. Oh, we need the guardians, right? The guardians to play pity pat, to play patty cake with all the bad guys, and they're going to put their hands behind their back. But unfortunately, it doesn't happen. So what the old timers used to say, and it's something that I'm going to say that every cop should continue to have in their head: if you're going to be on the job, you can't go out there softly with, oh, I could get arrested. Oh, I could get a CCRB. You're in volatile, dangerous situations. You have to react to situations and react to incidents and make decisions that you could put your head on the pillow at night and go to bed, right? So the saying is, it's better to be tried by 12 than to be carried by 6. And I think that's a saying that if you're going to continue to be out on New York City streets and you're going to do this, you're going to have to understand that you're more than likely going to be tried by 12, but it's still better than to be carried by 6. And you're going to have to make decisions to secure your pension, which Juan did, which I did, which Eric did, that are harsh, and that guys in the past never had to make decisions. So I laugh when the old timers sit there and they're like, okay, you're crazy, great job, best job in the world, my nephew's on, blah, 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 blah. I was like, it ain't the job you on, bro. You have no idea what this job is anymore. You're way past it. You don't even know what we're talking about. You wouldn't even believe the things I'm telling you. People are getting fired for nonsense. So I'm going to say it right now. I'm going to say it again. All you libs that are going to write about it, good. It's better to be tried by 12 than to be carried by 6.
I had said this a long time ago, John, if you remember. And I believe you said it also. And I've been saying this for quite some time now. The second you become a law enforcement officer, especially in a democratic city, because it's happening throughout the entire country, and especially in New York City, and especially in the county of Manhattan. If you're working in Manhattan as a New York City police officer, if you graduate and become a New York City police officer, or you're in service now as a New York City police officer, and you land you're working in Manhattan, you are closer to jail yourself. Every day you go to work, you strap on those boots, you put on those pants, and you put on that uniform, and you strap on that shield. It is the same patch, but it's a different job. I spoke to Juan Perez. I said, Juan, tell me how many chiefs have reached out to you to see how you're doing, if they reached out to you to ask how they can support you in this case. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, John, he was working for the New York City Police Department that day. That day, he was working for the New York City Police Department. That day, he was working on behalf of the people of New York City. And that's why I say, Juan, where are all these people? Did the chief reach out to you? No. Did the lieutenant that was working that day, the platoon commander, did he reach out to you because you were working for him that day? No. Did the sergeant reach out to you? The sergeant, the frontline supervisor that was there that day? No. Did anyone reach out? No. This is how we treat our New York City police officers. John, we just spoke yesterday about this so-called blue family honoring a probationary police officer tragically lost his life. And we talk about how New York City police officers are loved in death But what about in life? And these are the things that John and I are talking about. Because Juan Perez is a living human being that did his job. He's still alive. And he needs you, and you need him. And he's left to hang. He's left to fry. No one's calling him to check on him. No one's saying, hey, Juan, what can we do for you? How can we help? There's 20,000 some odd police officers. Couldn't we raise $10 a police officer? That would be $200,000 to help Juan Perez to have some strength and support to fight this case and to fight his appeal and to assist the union in this case. And that burden would come off the union, which comes off you yourself also, to help Juan Perez, because Juan Perez is you. And if you just sit by Juan Perez, there'll be another Juan Perez. And the next Juan Perez may be you. So we have to stop, again, with this ideology that we let our people hang and we treat them as lepers. We have to start supporting them and ask, are we really a family? Why do we only love our fellow brothers and sisters in death, but not in life? And again, Juan Perez is living and well. But again, we treat him as a leper.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to do a podcast on NYPD changing its motto from courtesy, professionalism, and respect, which in my opinion is the worst political PR strategy you could possibly have. But we'll get into it in depth. But I really think, I'm going to suggest it now, the motto should really be every man for himself, because that is the culture that has been bred into the New York City Police Department. At the end of the day, nobody sticks together. There is no family. There is no brotherhood. You know, and I used to tell people, I came on this job by myself. I'm going to retire by myself. And that's exactly what it is. And listen, at the end of the day, there's nothing wrong with that. But when you portray this organization as a brotherhood, as a family, as, oh, we're always going to be there for you, we're always going to honor your sacrifice. Juan Perez was put in a dangerous, dynamic situation. He wanted to do it. He signed up to be a New York City police officer. We trained him to do it. We asked him to do it. He did it. And because of 6 seconds that doesn't look pretty on camera, he lost his career and he's facing jail time. And the family silent. The family says nothing. It's actually, the family is actually very mad that we're even talking about this and doing a podcast about it. The family's very mad if you have a different point of view from the elected royalty, the appointed royalty that comes in based upon who's elected. You're not allowed to criticize the job. If you criticize the job, you're a horrible person. We're terrible people, Eric. You criticize the union. That's a big no-no. And then you criticize the hand of the king, the first of his name, Kaz Daughtry, or Jeff Madry, or Ed Caban, who's patted me on the back once or shook my hand. Oh, I went to a barbecue with him once. Like, come on, man. Like, we're not allowed to have opinions. You're not allowed to talk. It's absolute insanity. This is the most dysfunctional family that's ever been, and they're full of shit. And that's it. I mean, there's really nothing else we could say about it. Juan Perez has been on his own this whole time. The union did step up, but as far as support of his mental health, as far as people acknowledging that could be you, no one's acknowledging that. You know, Caban didn't take his case and shield him from prosecution, but I'm sure he shielded some other people from prosecution, and sure there was some calls to the DA Alvin Bragg's office about some other cases that more than likely, if I looked at, or you looked at, or the public looked at, they'd say, no, that cop should be in jail. That cop did something wrong. That's not this case. But there are cases out there like that, and I'm more than likely Ed Caban took those, made calls to the DA office, made calls to the mayor, and they're shielding officers that shouldn't be on New York City streets from prosecution and allowing them to continue to further their career and potentially harm other members of the public, while they're having good police officers who did absolutely nothing wrong. They're throwing them to the wolves and letting them be prosecuted.
Absolutely. That's why we covered this the other day on this podcast, how nepotism has corrupted the disciplinary system. But not only has nepotism corrupted the disciplinary system, nepotism has corrupted the entire New York City Police Department. And it is a high level of corruption, because clearly Juan Perez was a good, honorable New York City police officer. And if you actually watch the video of his encounter with this emotionally disturbed perpetrator, he did his job as he was paid and trained to do. He protected the public from someone who was in mental crisis, but who was an extreme threat to those in the public. We had people who were legitimately intimidated and scared for their lives. And Juan Perez sacrificed his financial liability, his civil liability for New York City police officers, and now potentially his actual freedom. And now he has a conviction and his life is forever altered. And yet we see police officers, especially those in khaki pants, who have been treated as a different tiered system within the New York City Police Department. It's almost as if they have a different patch. They're on a different job. And yet we see videos where you could stomp someone on the head, and it doesn't matter if there's injuries or not, because according to the disciplinary matrix, no injuries is subject to termination when it comes to an assault case or excessive force. And yet Juan Perez did his job as he was paid and trained to do. And if you ask me, he acted appropriately. He acted as a professional. The perpetrator was rendered unconscious, but that is a byproduct of engaging in a physical encounter with a police officer. And people have to understand the reality. When you engage in a physical encounter, that is potentially a byproduct, rendering someone unconscious, and injuries may succumb. And exactly what John said earlier, getting into a fight is ugly. And when you challenge a New York City police officer and you resist arrest, it is exactly that. It is a fight. And yet we see a completely different standard, and we see a level of nepotism that is completely corrupt, because we have some cowboys running around in khaki pants, especially those in a position of leadership as a lieutenant, stomp someone on the head. Now, I don't want to see anyone go to jail, and anyone face their financial freedom, and anyone face their potential termination. Legitimately, I don't even want that lieutenant to get terminated or arrested. That's not what I want for somebody. But what I want for somebody is fairness. I want fairness for Juan, because Juan is you. And yet that lieutenant was modified, did not face any prosecution. You have to ask yourselves why. And yet Juan Perez went to a 911 call, and he is now a criminal by the New York state law.
One standard of justice for all. All right, so I think we beat it up, and Juan, we support you, and we hope and pray that this judge sees that it would not be for the good of New York City to put somebody like you in prison. Whether he agrees with us that you did not assault the individual or not, and he clearly doesn't agree on that fact, I think we could all agree on that there is no need for you to serve a day in jail. You've never done anything. This is absolutely ridiculous. Going back on yesterday, received a lot of messages about the podcast we did yesterday about the recruit that died of a heat stroke. Well, we don't know that he died of a heat stroke. He died. We've yet to find out the cause of his death, but he died during training at Rodman's Neck while there was a heat advisory. Now, we've been receiving tons of messages about that the recruits have to wear long sleeve shirts. So I'm just going to read you something. As for the long sleeves at July 4th, it goes back to a few months when Kaz came to the academy and did not like the way the recruits looked. The first Dep had the academy staff executives in her office, and she belittled them about how the recruits looked. So the executives are now scared of their own shadow in regards to uniform appearance of the recruits. This is why they are not allowed to wear short sleeves at the detail. They were also told to wear Oxford shoes as well, because they were afraid that somebody from standards would see a recruit look bad and report it. It was not until a couple of sergeants said that you can't have them in those shoes that they were allowed to wear boots. This changed in an hour before they went on the tour and the day before the detail. Going on how scared the executives were, the recruits were told not to have water on their posts as well. The supervisors at that detail, captains, lieutenants, and sergeants, all told the recruits that they're allowed to have water and to go out and get water while they're on post. This way, they would not pass out. Even then, some of the recruits were so scared to have water on post because of the riot act they were read the day before. It was so bad that the supervisors had to go buy waters and were handing it out to them. This way, the recruits knew they would not get in trouble. If these executives in training were not so afraid of their own shadow and not only concentrating on getting the next bump instead of actually looking out for their personnel, the recruits would be working in healthier conditions than they do now. Not saying what could Not saying what could have happened still could have happened, but wearing a vest with a long sleeve shirt buttoned to the top while running can't be a healthy combination.
You know what's interesting about this, right? So there's a difference between training and hazing. And the information that you just provided is the same information I was getting yesterday also. And I said, you know what this is? This is hazing. And when I was in the Marine Corps, and for all my veterans out there, they know exactly what I'm talking about. Hazing in the military is illegal, and you're actually subjected, if you haze someone, subjected to the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and you could actually do prison time for hazing someone. It is against the law in the military, and it should be against the law in the police department also, because hazing could lead to someone's death. It could lead to injury. Hazing is a legitimate problem. There is a complete difference from training, and I want people to understand that. Sometimes there's a fine line between hazing and training, but training has a purpose. When you train, it has a purpose to make you to overcome challenges, right? You may do things that are difficult so that your body becomes desensitized to certain things, and you can meet challenges. But when you deny someone of water, that doesn't desensitize you anything. That doesn't improve your ability. That's actually hazing and put you in a precarious position where you could ultimately get injured and ultimately die. So there's a complete dichotomy and a difference between hazing someone and training them. Training should be difficult, but it has to be done intelligently. There is a big difference. Training has significance and purpose. When you haze someone, there is no purpose other than to demean them, other than to demoralize them, and to potentially cause someone to be to have discomfort and to potentially cause injury.
I think what it highlights, I don't know that it was hazing more than it just highlights that there are no safeguards in place when it comes to training, when it comes to recruit discipline, when it comes to standards in the New York City Police Department. It's also rumored that the officer that died was a medical holdover. I don't know that he was, but that just speaks again. You have a medical holdover in a heat advisory with a vest on and full uniform and a long sleeve shirt, because Kaz doesn't like tattoos, or Kaz doesn't like people in short sleeves and long sleeves. And you don't think that's a problem? Like, there's no safeguard in place to make sure that this doesn't happen. Like, there should be a safeguard in place that hazing can't even be possible. It can't even be dumb shit like this could happen, because it should have been stated in a heat advisory, there'll be no outdoor training. In a heat advisory, medical holdovers aren't even allowed outside whatsoever. We're not going to be doing any, like, there should be some type of safeguards in place. And what this shows is that, we talk about it all the time, right? What's the New York City Police Department concerned with? Twitter and parties. It's the New York City party, the New York Republic of New York City's party department. And that's the main concern. It's not whatever assignment they have, right? They're all flipping around. Oh, this one's the chief of department. This one's the chief of patrol. This one's the chief of transit. None of them are really qualified to be anywhere where they are, and they don't really take hold of what they're doing anyway. You have a few men in the New York City Police Department who live, breathe, eat, and sleep the job, and they work themselves to death while everybody else partying. They get very little credit. You're going to see some of those guys get bumped soon, and you're going to see them have some big ranks soon, but they'll still not be partying. Those are going to guys that do all the work while everybody else is out to play. Chief of training is one of those spots. If you look at that, I think you see the training. A lot of people talking about, oh, he wasn't in shape. Why wasn't he in shape? Why wasn't he in shape? That's not a problem. How do we know he's not in shape? If he's not in shape, why do we have recruits in the academy that aren't in shape? How does that happen? How does that happen? Right? And then everyone's like, oh, well, it was because of the mandate. Again, he wasn't mandated. More than likely, he did put something in his body. But again, the New York City Police Department's not going to look into that and the effects of what they mandated on others, right? Because they don't want any civil liability. So I think when we look at all this, you just look at, there's no structure in the police department. Every unit, every bureau is run completely differently. And there are no safeguards in place when it comes to the health and wellness of officers, and as much as we're saying that the union has done a good job with Juan Perez after they got a little nudge from us, as much as we're saying that, I think when you look at this now, you're going to say that they did a horrible job. And I'm not blaming Pat Hendry. I'm saying historically, all the unions have done a horrible job.
In my opinion, John, it's all out hazing. And the reason why I say that, it doesn't necessarily have to be intentional to say, you know what, I'm going to do this because I want to endanger these recruits. Because ultimately, that's what hazing does. It endangers the recruits and endangers anyone in training because it has no significance and purpose. And the reason why I say it's hazing, I don't think they're intentionally doing it, because it's a byproduct of their egos. It's a byproduct of them abusing their authority. The reason why they make these decisions, Kaz Daughtry, Tiny Kinsella, they make these decisions because these decisions are based on ego. They're not based on good leadership. These decisions they make for the recruits are not saying that, well, we need to make these decisions because it's better training for them. It's going to make them better police officers. It's because their egos were struck. And that's why they make these decisions, which ultimately haze these recruits, which endangers them, abuses them. Because that's what hazing is. It's when you abuse a group. It's when you humiliate them, you degrade them, you demoralize them, or you put them in a position that endangers them with no significance or purpose. And having them wear long sleeves or not having their water has no significance or purpose other than because they're addressing their egos and they're flexing their authority. Because would Kaz Daughtry wear his uniform perfectly himself? Would he be able to stand in the position in a heat advisory during training without water? Because clearly he's out of shape. Because if Kaz Daughtry was put in that position now, unfortunately, he may meet his demise also if he was put in that same precarious position. So I do believe that this is hazing, and hazing in universities and colleges and the military is illegal, and it should be outlawed in the New York City Police Department as well.
You know, I'll agree with you that overall it's hazing. Overall, everything that's been going on is it's really a dictatorship. It's a complete utter dictatorship. You will not have a car on post. You're not allowed to have a car on post, which is a huge safety hazard. These guys are going to details and not allowed to have a car on the post because God forbid one takes a break while one stands outside. A leader would say, whack it up the entire time. Anytime I was on a detail and we had cars, one in, one out. I want you guys taking breaths. I want you guys aware. Watch your partner's back while you're out on the street, and vice versa. Anything happens, get out of the car. You see something weird, get out of the car. At these times, you'll be out. But that's a leader. But no, what the hazing is no, you will not have a car on duty. If there's a car on your post, you're getting a CD just for the car being on post, right? If you're sitting in the car, you're not getting a CD. We're transferring you. I mean, I agree with you. I think overall, yeah. I mean, is it hazing or is it a complete dictatorship? And you have an unqualified individual who has serious issues when it comes to his confidence, when it comes to like he wants everyone to bow down like he's a leader. He wants a photo of everybody. He wants a photo of him in everyone's office and at the dinner table saying Kaz. And he surrounds himself, if you could tell, every time I see him surrounded by very young cops, very young boys, young people who don't fully understand this job, who have not yet got their own feet wet and couldn't stand on their own 2 feet. If I threw them in situations, I gave them 911 calls and I told them to handle it, they wouldn't be able to stand on their own 2 feet. And that's who he surrounds himself with, other than his drivers that follow him around, and they know better than him, but they have low integrity and no spine, so they can't say anything. So they matter for nothing. Their experience matters for nothing because they're cowards, and they'll ultimately bow down to him. So yeah, I'll agree with you on that stance. But again, like I said, I think there's no safeguards in place. Those safeguards should be put in place where it can't happen, and it's not there. Those safeguards aren't there. You're on a foot post. You have a car, but you can't have it. So if somebody shoots across the street and flees, you can't get them. If someone starts shooting at you, you can't take cover. If you are feeling lightheaded for a second, you can't go in the car and cool off and have a bottle of water. Or if they don't like you having things on post, at least you have some place to put your equipment and your stuff that you may need. Like, remember the helmets that Ed Caban said you don't need when he signed the protest settlement agreement with the mayor, and your batons? Like, maybe you might need those because maybe, who knows? Wow, Eric, there's not any protests going on in New York City ever, right? No, never. There's never any protests that turn violent and turn illegal in New York City that a cop might need to get their helmet and their baton. They just write it on every notification, hats and bats, right?
You know, it's interesting, right? I'm gonna mention two things here, right? So the first thing is this, right? I'm sure the old timers that are watching this are gonna say, "Oh, back in the day when I was on my post, you know, we had long sleeve shirts on, we had these heavy pants, we had big boots on, we were sweating, we were tough." And you know what? There might be an argument there. And I would say, okay, yes, times may be tougher. And those situations did make you tough. And I'm not saying the guys can't be tough now. But do you want to be tough or do you want to be good at what you do? You want to be good and tough at the same time. And, you know, it's same thing, you know, when I'm doing martial arts and I used to box. When I started boxing in a fight gym, your offense that you learn, your defense is your offense, because they don't teach you initially in a fight gym of how to defend yourself. They just put you in the ring so that their fighters have people that they could use you as tomato cans, right? So for the first 6 months, you don't learn anything. You just get beat up, and you get that twitch for the first 6 months. You get tough, right? Because you learn how to handle these punches, but you don't get good at it because you got that twitch and you're just surviving. You're surviving so that these other guys can use you until you get to the point that you get better. And I realized when I went to Asia and I started experiencing how the Thais train. And in Thailand, they train very playful. And it's very light. And some could say, it doesn't look too tough. But let me tell you something. Those are the toughest and best fighters that I've seen. I went to some of those fights and they are fantastic. And yet when they train, it's very playful. So when they fight, they don't have that twitch and they're very confident. So they're good and they're tough. And that's why I say, and I get it, the old timers say, oh, we were tough. And you know what? Hazing them, it may make them tougher, but is it going to make them better? Absolutely not. And I think that's what's important, is to make them better. So we have to evolve. That's why it's important that we go on and evolve. So we have to train smarter, and we have to train to make our people better and more proficient. Yes, they have to be tough, but not tough and stupid. So what they did to the old timers is wrong, standing out there sweating and potentially put them in a position where they're endangering themselves. Did that make you a better police officer? It may have given you more grit, but it didn't. Did it make you technically and proficiently better? And that's what's the most important thing.
So I'm gonna say right now it's a bunch of bullshit. The old timers, were they more masculine? Absolutely. Did they have more testosterone than these guys? 100%. Did they take shit on the street? Absolutely not. Were they quick with their hands? Absolutely they were. As far as that's all true. When it comes to actually doing work, though, when it comes to, you're standing out for 16 hours, those guys weren't standing out for 16 hours. You know what I was told in the New York City Police Department when I first came in by old timers? A good cop is never cold, tired, hungry, or horny. What does that mean? They're taking breaks like crazy. I spoke to a guy one time. He told me, you know what he did with the game they used to play? How far could you get in one tour? How far could you get in one tour? So what they would do is they get to work, they'd get their car, and they'd leave. They'd leave the command and see how far they could reach. You know where he got? And he showed me the photo. You know where he got in full uniform? Miami International Airport. Boom. Back to at roll call at the end of tour. You had to get there and get back to roll call at the end of tour and get out. Went to Miami International Airport. You know why? Because you weren't tracked the way you are now in the New York City Police Department. You can't even move. Literally, guys are telling me that they're getting criticized by the route they're taking in the jobs or what they were doing during that tour. Again, question, why were you parked here for 10 minutes? Why was your RMP doing 50 miles an hour at this point? Why was your RMP doing 35 miles an hour here? Literally tracking every second and every moment of the day. On top of that, body camera could go live at any point. There was never this level of scrutiny. And these guys got to rest, right? When they were hungry, they ate. When they were tired, they slept. When they were hot, they got cooled off. Those are not options today for the modern cop. So were you guys tougher? Yes. Physically, mentally. Did you guys have to adhere to the same working conditions? I know there were no air conditions in the cars of the 70s and the 80s. I get that. But you guys weren't in the car that long. And when you went and cooled off after, or you went to your goon's house, or you went to a store and you hung out and you did your community policing, and there's nothing wrong with that, but you weren't under the same level of scrutiny. So when you're talking about this shit with someone standing out with a stupid polyester shirt on, button up to the top, because, they don't like to see, Kaz doesn't like when he sees tattoos. Kaz doesn't like it. So, and then you have the entire upper echelon coming down, and there's no men in there that have testosterone and say, I don't care what Kaz likes. They're wearing short sleeve shirts. Too bad. Tell Kaz to put a long sleeve shirt and come stand out here for 16 hours. When you don't have men in leadership positions to do that, this is what happens. It comes down. Weak men create hard times. Kaz, congratulations.
I think at this point that leadership needs to be held accountable. And I think that it's either internal affairs or maybe the standard assessment unit, the stupid unit that they have. Instead of worrying about people wearing white socks, they should be holding the leadership accountable. Whoever's in a leadership position, and if people are being hazed, they should be held accountable. And I think that if you're hazing people, you should be subject to termination. I always had my people train hard. I had them train hard. I challenged them, but I didn't haze them. And there's a difference. And the job needs to be taught. The leadership needs to be taught exactly what hazing is, because it may be done intentionally and it may not. Because serving your ego and abusing your authority in your rank could ultimately haze someone and endanger them because you failed in your leadership. We talk about failed leadership all the time. And when you haze people, that is completely inept. That is completely unacceptable. That does not make them better. That does not make them proficient. You're just endangering them. You can challenge them, train them hard. I believe that you and I have extreme amount of grit. I went through a tough Marine Corps, tough police department. I was on a graduate officer candidate school, but I wasn't hazed. I was challenged and trained. And there's a difference. And you know what? Arguably, we could say the reason why those in the 70s and the 80s were able to endure those conditions, because they did have better training physically, so they were in better shape, and they also had more testosterone to withstand it. And that is another argument that we had put up. Was probationary police officer Ordonez trained properly? Was his body hardened? Were we sharpening iron with iron to make him the most physically fit, the best version of himself to withstand these conditions? And that's what we're talking about when you lower the standards. Just in opposition of Juanita Holmes said, when Juanita Holmes said that the run is not applicable for the recruits, that is not necessary. It absolutely is necessary because it hardens and sharpens the body.
Don't need to run. You don't need to run a mile. All right, going on an hour, but real quick, this shit, it's been bothering me since yesterday. I just put a meme out about it. Crimes up over 30%. Violent crimes up over 30% since New York City Mayor Eric Adams took office. There's illegal protests every night that shut down critical infrastructure in New York City. Police officers are leaving in droves. Residents are leaving in droves. Businesses are leaving in droves. Illegal gangs are coming into New York City and bringing third world crime. So what the Deputy Commissioner of Operations is concerned with, though, now is the beach, is drones on the beach. So for those of you that aren't aware, when you go to the beach, there's wildlife in the ocean. There's things like sharks, there's dolphins, there's whales, there's fish, there's seaweed, there's things of that nature. So we have New York City police officers now doing the job of a lifeguard somewhat, because what they're really doing is really just playing a game with an Xbox 360 controller, not the PS5 controller that Kaz had on his desk. Not that one. The Xbox 360 controller, and they're flying drones over. And they spot a shark few hundred feet off the shore. Kaz Daughtry tweets about it. A shark was spotted. We closed down the beach. All this complete, utter nonsense. I was just at the beach. We saw a bunch of dolphins. The beach didn't get shut down. I was in Florida recently, and there was a hammerhead shark. Literally came to the shore, and it was chasing a stingray. Do you know how long the beach was shut down for? 0 seconds. People were actually in the water. The hammerhead swam through them, swam out the shore. Nobody said anything. It was because you're in the natural habitat of that. So I thought it was hysterical. What do you think about this drone program and New York City police officers monitoring the water?
I was laughing so hard. First of all, it's so ridiculous. And the only reason I think they have this whole drone program is because Kaz Daughtry got caught in his office with this PS5 playing it, and they had to come up with some semantics just to completely sideline this whole story. And clearly, I think this whole drone thing came out of opposition to New York's Finest Retired Unfiltered podcast. They were trying to make fun of you, call you the BMS war. Meanwhile, this guy is sitting with his PlayStation in his office, and he got caught with his Captain America chair. He got caught with his little comic book office. And that's how this whole thing developed. It's absolutely ridiculous to make it appear that that's actually what they care about. This whole thing is ridiculous. First of all, the water belongs to the fish. It doesn't belong to the people. If you want to swim, beware. I mean, this is ridiculous.
Absolutely, utterly ridiculous. Thank you. And just for the audience, the listeners, the haters, whoever, guys, when you're commenting, the only thing we could really check is YouTube. So please go to our YouTube channel, like and subscribe the video, comment there. I can't check all the platforms that we're out on. Either could Eric. We're just not at that capability yet. We're going to start to do some subscription-based content we're going to put out there, and we'll release that later. Probably see that little mid to late August, where some of our shows will be behind a paywall, just so that we can earn some funds to improve the quality of this show and actually get paid for all of the time we put in and do. Because I mean, it's been about a year and a half we've been doing this. We put a lot of time into it. I think you guys enjoy it. So, and I think it's necessary. I do. I think it's necessary that the voiceless have been given a voice, and that there's actual analytical experience, not from when you turn on conservative talk radio like WABC and you hear guys like Sid Rosenberg talk about how he supports the cops and he supports Donald Trump when he voted for Hillary Clinton. And then he's sitting there saying it's not the NYPD fault that a recruit dropped dead and during a heat advisory with long sleeves on top. Catch Daughtry's my friend. Ed Caban's my friend. Everybody's his friend. Guys, everybody's the guy's friend. Absolute ridiculous. We don't have a lot of friends here, so you don't have to worry about that. And even if we do, we'll still call out that it is what it is. We're having open discussions, and these people are welcome on. Sid, you're also welcome on. I mean, you're following basically everything we do anyway and reporting about it. So, you know, you might as well come on. And but if you want to comment to us and you want us to interact, please go to YouTube, like and subscribe on our YouTube channel and comment there, so that we could reach back out, whether during the show or not. Sometimes I'm caught up. Eric's caught up. I'm looking at my phone for other things. I'm getting messages as we're doing it on my phone. But we're going to get better with this live thing. So for right now, we're just asking, if you do want to interact with us, go to YouTube. Watch us when we do lives there. If we're live on Twitter, we're live on YouTube. If we're live on YouTube, we're live on a million other platforms, whatever that may be. And I just appreciate all the support. You know, we're getting up there, and we're gonna push this thing to #1, baby.
Absolutely, we're growing. I think this is necessary. Cops Turn Podcast is getting the information out there, telling the truth. Just as John just mentioned, Sid Rosenberg and others just like him. Watch out for people that say and do things that are different from each other, and that's what's different about this podcast. We do what we say and we say what we do, in complete opposition to what your politicians and some of these fake talk radio people tell you. The information that they get from New York's Finest Retired Unfiltered podcast, they get it from this 265 Police Live series, and they use it for their own benefit. But you know what? New York City police officers, to all the American police officers out there, we want you to use this to your benefit. Use this to make you better. Reach out to Juan Perez, support each other, and support this podcast. Thank you so much for allowing us to grow. John and I spent an extreme amount of time on this podcast, getting this information out to you to assist, be a force from outside to help within. So again, like and subscribe. Tell your friends about the show. Tell your family about the show. Help us grow so that we could help you. If you like what you see, if you're watching the lives, you want to donate to this channel, right now at this point, we'll start allowing donations so that we could grow. We can start to produce some more on a production and eventually do some more things with this podcast. Just hit the thank button. If you want to drop a couple of dollars, we thank you so much for your donations. New York's Finest Retired Unfiltered podcast. Stay safe out there. Keep your eyes open. Take care.
There's a handful of retired officers that don't live in the state that have a lot to say about the dream team, as I like to call it. All of a sudden, they retire and have a master plan on how to fight crime, but nothing to contribute when they were here. They want to come back and be part of the dream team. What can I say?
Law enforcement professionals dedicate their lives to serving and protecting our community. But who's protecting their financial futures? That's where Laidlaw Blue comes in. Our wealth management platform is specifically designed for the law enforcement community. Laidlaw Blue is a division within Laidlaw Wealth Management, run by retired New York City detective John McDermott. His status as a retired detective uniquely positions him to establish a deep connection between Laidlaw Blue and the law enforcement community. Our platform is easy to use and provides a range of financial services, including investment management, retirement planning, and insurance solutions. With Laidlaw Blue, you can secure your financial future and provide for your loved ones. Our team of experienced financial advisors understands the unique challenges and opportunities that law enforcement professionals face. We're here to help you navigate the complexities of financial planning and achieve your goals. Laidlaw Blue. Secure your financial future today. Book a meeting using the QR code displayed or call us directly on 888 901 Blue. That's 888 901 Blue.